Had the ancient Stoics endured as a discrete philosophical school, it is reasonable to believe they would assent, at least in broad outline, to the core principles of modern just war thinking: legitimate authority, just cause, right intention, last resort, discrimination, proportionality, and necessity. They would not treat these as ceremonial moral furniture or as a monolithic doctrine immune to critique. Like all serious moral thinkers, they would argue at the margins, press one another with urgency, and reject lazy absolutes. But the deeper question is not whether Stoics would subscribe to just war theory. The deeper question is why they would endorse certain constraints, and where they would insist the burden of proof remains crushingly high, especially in modern wars where long-range weapons, hybrid legal rationales, and strategic ambiguity make moral clarity harder, not easier. Before we get to criteria, however, we should acknowledge the obvious objection. Why would Stoics moralize about war at all? If death and misery are indifference, why should a Stoic feel obligated to protect non-combatants, to restrain violence, or to risk tactical advantage for ethical discipline? A Stoic warrior might say, if I must regard my own life as indifferent, why should I regard anyone else's life with any special reverence? Why should I bind myself to standards that might get me killed? This is not a foolish question. The restrictions societies impose upon warriors are not free. They come at real costs to safety and immediate combat effectiveness. Yet the objection rests on a familiar confusion, what we might call the confusion between how I should feel about certain outcomes and what I should do in response to them. Stoicism does not say, because life is an indifferent, preserving life is irrelevant. Stoicism says, because life is an indifferent, life is not what makes you morally good or bad. It does not follow that you should abandon the appropriate selection of preferred indifference. Even if my own survival is not a moral good, it remains a rational object of prudent preference. Likewise, even if the welfare of others is not the summum bonum, it does not follow that I may deny moral responsibility toward it. This distinction becomes decisive once we remember where Stoicism begins, with a disciplined account of agency. Epictetus famously opens the Enchiridion with the boundary line that guards moral freedom. Some things are up to us, others are not. War, geopolitics, and the behavior of states are largely not up to us. But our judgments, intentions, and choices remain ours. Stoicism, therefore, cannot abandon moral reasoning about war without abandoning its own core. The insistence that the human being is responsible for the rational use of choice under conditions of uncertainty and pressure. And Marcus Aurelius presses the point from another angle. When something external seems to crush us, what crushes us is not the thing itself, but our judgment about it. If this is true of ordinary misfortune, it is especially true of wartime passions: fear, hatred, pride, revenge, those moral solvents that dissolve restraint precisely when restraint becomes most costly and most necessary. The Stoics would bother moralizing about war because they would regard war as the most violent laboratory of moral agency, the place where rational discipline is tested, corrupted, or revealed. 1. War is not a necessary evil. It is a contest among duties. Modern moral talk often describes war as a necessary evil or lesser evil. This sounds realistic, but it carries a poisonous implication. If war is inherently evil, then moral reasoning becomes decorative. Once evil is assumed, we slip toward the idea that all acts within war are equally beyond refinement. so we may as well do whatever ends it fastest. That logic is the natural habitat of indiscriminate bombing, collective punishment, and the fantasy that destruction can purchase moral closure. Stoicism would reject this framing. Stoics deny that an appropriate action can be evil in the moral sense. If a decision is justified by reason and consistent with virtue, it cannot be evil merely because it is painful. In Stoic terms, what matters is not whether an action is clean, but whether it is appropriate, defensible according to rational standards under the best available information. This does not romanticize war. It imposes a harsher burden. War becomes morally possible only as the potential winner among competing duties, where the duty of non-maleficence is overridden by a duty of greater weight under exceptional circumstances. That framework fits our world in January 2026 precisely because the world has not moved past war. The largest and most consequential conventional war remains Russia's full-scale war in Ukraine, now deep into its fourth year. A UN human rights monitoring mission reports that 2025 was the deadliest year for Ukrainian civilians since 2022, with long-range weapons, missiles, and loitering munitions, causing a substantial share of casualties, and civilian harm rising sharply compared to 2024. But the modern landscape also contains a different kind of conflict. Interventions wrapped in legal memos, special operations, and contested claims of legitimacy. Early January 2026 saw the capture and removal of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in a U.S. operation, an event immediately surrounded by disputes about legality under international law and domestic authority. Meanwhile, in East Asia, strategic conflict is increasingly rehearsed rather than declared. China conducted what Reuters described as its largest live-fire exercises around Taiwan to date, explicitly simulating blockades and strikes, with activities spanning record-designated zones. A Stoic reading does not begin with slogans, aggression, liberation, axis, freedom. It begins by asking, what overriding duty is being claimed, and does it truly outweigh non-maleficence? Then, it asks the harder question, is the claimed duty being pursued with integrity or merely used as moral camouflage for passions and interests? 2. Non-maleficence is not a switch. It must be overridden continuously. One of the most corrosive moral errors is to treat justification for war as a blanket moral license. If our cause is just, people say, then whatever we do is justified. Stoicism would call this laziness. The duty of non-maleficence is not simply overridden once and then discarded. It must be overridden continuously, case by case, act by act. Otherwise, the concept of just collapses into mere tribal permission. This is not merely philosophical. It describes the moral reality of modern warfare, where long-range weapons, urban environments, and information asymmetry make civilian harm both foreseeable and easy to rationalize. Consider Ukraine. The UN monitoring report's emphasis on the increased impact of long-range weapons on civilian casualties is not just data, it is an ethical pressure test. In a Stoic framework, the mere fact that you are at war does not absolve you of responsibility for foreseeable civilian harm. You are required to justify each strike as necessary for legitimate military aims, and to show that alternatives were not reasonably available. This is where Stoicism becomes more than aphorisms. It becomes a discipline that refuses the easiest path of moral self-exemption. 3. Anger and hatred corrupt judgment. Seneca's diagnosis, if anything makes war metastasize into cruelty, it is the emotional permission structure of conflict. Anger, humiliation, vengeance, and the intoxication of punishment. Stoicism understood this long before modern psychology gave it clinical language. Seneca's analysis of anger into ira treats rage as a force that dethrones reason, so it becomes a kind of madness. Modern summaries often render the classical insight as anger is a brief madness, a formulation widely associated with the Latin tradition of Stoic moral diagnosis. The deeper Stoic point is not literary, it is operational. When anger governs, criteria like discrimination and proportionality become fragile because anger wants the enemy to suffer, not merely to be stopped. This matters in long wars, where fatigue and grief create powerful incentives to abandon restraint. A Stoic ethic of war would therefore treat right intention as far more than a checkbox. It would treat intention as a constant object of scrutiny. Are we acting from rational duty or from passion wearing duty's mask? 4. Legitimacy and the Venezuela case. When domestic authority attempts to bypass international constraint, just war thinking insists that war-making must be constrained by legitimate authority. Stoicism would agree. Yet it would insist legitimacy is not the same as power and not the same as domestic authorization. The U.S. operation that removed Nicolas Maduro from power generated intense controversy. Reuters reported that experts questioned the operation's legality under international law and noted congressional notification issues. The Associated Press reported that a DOJ Office of Legal Counsel opinion concluded the operation was legally permissible and not war in the constitutional sense, emphasizing domestic legal justifications. And notably, reporting on a newly released memo indicates the legal reasoning considered it unnecessary to resolve whether the action violated international law, prioritizing the president's domestic authority instead. From a Stoic perspective, this is an ethical red flag, not merely a political dispute. Why? Because Stoicism demands integrity, alignment between reason, principles, and actions. If the moral case for overriding non-maleficence is strong, it should withstand the scrutiny of broader norms designed to prevent arbitrary force. If the legal rationale effectively says, international law need not be addressed if domestic authority exists, the door opens to a logic where might becomes legality and legality becomes morality, that a Stoic would not necessarily conclude the action was unjust merely because it was controversial. Stoicism is not procedural fetishism, but Stoicism would insist the burden of proof is immense when violence is used across borders against a head of state, precisely because such acts risk eroding the very normative structure that keeps the international system from reverting to raw predation. 5. Negotiation before force. Cicero as the bridge between Stoic rationality and last resort. One of the clearest lines connecting classical moral reasoning to modern just war criteria is the priority of negotiation over violence. Cicero, whose ethical thinking is deeply entangled with Stoic influence, argues that disputes should be addressed through negotiation if possible, and that war should be a last resort. He also argues that a just war requires demands for satisfaction or due warning and formal declaration. Even if modern war practice does not always treat formal declaration as essential, the Stoic spirit behind Cicero's argument is potent. Last resort is not sentimental pacifism. It is the rational refusal to treat violence as the first language of politics. It is a safeguard against the passions that love war, because war simplifies. What does Stoicism contribute here that is not already geopolitical analysis? Stoicism insists that the most dangerous battlefield is often the mind, the space where fear becomes certainty, where propaganda becomes identity, where enemies become metaphysical demons rather than political actors capable of negotiation or deterrence. The popular line attributed to Marcus Aurelius, "You have power over your mind, not outside events," expresses that Stoic priority of inner sovereignty, even though the exact wording varies across translations and popular paraphrases. The Stoic point remains: a society that cannot govern its collective passions becomes easy to steer into catastrophic choices because it cannot tolerate complexity, patience, or ambiguity. A Stoic approach to war in our time can be summarized in 3 commitments. First, clarity about agency. Epictetus's boundary remains the foundation. What you control is your judgment and your choices. In wartime societies, this is revolutionary because it refuses the cheap comfort of collective fury. It refuses to outsource moral responsibility to history or necessity. Second, moral friction that never disappears. Even if a war can be justified, non-maleficence must be overridden continuously, not ceremonially. UN reporting on rising civilian casualties in Ukraine illustrates why this friction must be maintained under pressure rather than abandoned. Third, integrity against passion. Seneca's diagnosis of anger as a force that dethrones reason explains why right intention must be policed with almost ruthless honesty. And the Venezuela case shows how quickly violence can attempt to shelter under domestic authority while dodging the harder question of international constraint, an ethical hazard Stoicism cannot ignore. Stoicism does not promise to end war. It promises something harder, that war does not have to end you, not your rational agency, not your capacity for restraint, not your ability to recognize human beings even inside enemy roles. War does not make us good or evil by itself. It strips varnish. It reveals whether we remain sovereign over our judgments or become instruments of collective passion. And if, amid chaos, we can still choose what is right, not what is easy, not what flatters our pride, but what could stand before the conscience of a clear mind, then Stoicism is no longer merely a philosophy that speaks about peace. It becomes a way of living that carries inner peace into the loudest place on earth.